The CIA arrested me right on the tarmac, and the agent coldly said, "Your wife and son gave us everything, and they're testifying against you." I didn't fight back, and as they dragged me into a hidden black site, I realized my own family had betrayed me. They locked me in that cold room, and I'll never forget the agent's sneering laugh when I asked for one phone call. "Who could you possibly call?" he scoffed like I was some desperate joke. I just looked him dead in the eye, my voice as steady as a rock. "None of your damn business." I dialed that number. A number I swore I'd never use unless the world was truly ending. An hour later, the door blasted open, and the director of the CIA himself stormed in, face flushed, shouting, "Let him go now." But then in the same breath, he turned to his agents, his voice dropping to an icy command that still haunts my nightmares. "Arrest his wife and their son." For 15 years, I'd perfected the art of disappearing into plain sight. Stepping out of that sleek black Mercedes, adjusting my cufflinks in front of the Metropolitan Club, I was just Dean Rivers' successful Manhattan businessman. Unremarkable. Exactly how I liked it. Deep cover operations across 3 continents teach you that. A facade isn't just a disguise, it's a second skin. Then my phone buzzed. A text from my wife, Lindsay. "Working late again. Don't wait up." I stared at that message, a knot tightening in my gut. 3 months. 3 months ago those late nights started. 3 months ago my 22-year-old son, Chad, began dodging family dinners, too busy with college. 3 months ago I started noticing the subtle shifts. The way Lindsay's eyes would dart away, the sudden silence when I walked into a room. But Dean Rivers wasn't just some clueless husband. I'd infiltrated terrorist cells in Somalia. I'd eliminated targets in Moscow while sipping tea with their wives. I'd built and dismantled governments with nothing but a phone call and the right leverage. If my own family thought they could deceive me, they were about to learn a very, very expensive lesson. I pocketed the phone, the cold steel a stark contrast to the burning anger inside me, and walked into the club. Morris Dotson was already at our usual table. Morris, my handler for a decade at the agency before we'd both transitioned to private contracting. Now my partner in one of the world's most exclusive intelligence consulting firms, hidden behind the utterly bland name, Rivers and Associate Security Consulting. "You look like hell," Morris said without preamble, pushing a whiskey towards me. "Domestic issues," I replied, sinking into the leather chair, the exhaustion a heavy cloak. "Nothing I can't handle." "The wife." My jaw tightened, almost imperceptibly. "Among other things." Morris leaned forward, his expression wary. "Dean, you know I've got your back on anything professional but family. That's different territory, isn't it?" My voice was cold, measured, each word chipped from ice. "Betrayal is betrayal, Morris. I've eliminated men for less than what I suspect my own family is doing." "What exactly do you suspect?" I pulled out my phone. This morning, my private investigator had delivered a series of photographs. I laid them on the table. Lindsay entering a downtown hotel with Seth Burgess, my own business partner, my closest friend for 8 years. Chad sitting in a cafe with 2 men I immediately recognized as federal prosecutors. And financial records, showing Lindsay transferring money to accounts I didn't recognize. "They're building a case," I said, my voice barely above a whisper, laced with a chilling calm. "My wife is sleeping with my business partner, and my son is apparently cooperating with federal investigators. The question is, what do they think they have on me?" Morris studied the photos, his face darkening. "Rivers and Associates is clean. We've been careful. Officially, yes. But Seth has access to everything. If he's turned..." I let the implication hang in the air, heavy and suffocating. "What's the play?" I finished my whiskey in one swallow, the burn a welcome distraction from the inferno inside. "First, I find out exactly what they think they know. Then I remind them who they're dealing with." The next morning I was in my home office, reviewing the company's encrypted files, when Chad knocked. He looked nervous, which was unusual. Chad had always had his mother's easy smile, her social grace. But today there was a tension in his shoulders, a darting in his eyes, that reminded me of informants right before they broke. "Dad, can we talk?" "Of course." I gestured to the chair across from my desk, the same chair where I'd once interrogated a Chinese spy. Chad sat, fidgeting with his phone. "I've been thinking about my future, after college." I don't think I want to go into business. Maybe law school or government work. My expression didn't change, but inside, pieces were clicking into place, the puzzle of their betrayal forming a chilling picture. Government work. That's interesting. Any particular agency catch your attention? Maybe the Justice Department. Prosecution. Making sure bad guys get what they deserve. The irony wasn't lost on me. My own son apparently building a case against me talking about justice. And how would one go about getting into that field? I've been talking to some people. They say if you have information about crimes, about people who've been getting away with things, they're very interested in that kind of cooperation. I leaned back studying him. Chad looked so much like Lindsay. The same green eyes, the same way of tilting his head when he was lying. Because that's what this was. A lie wrapped in the pretense of career advice. That's very noble of you, Chad. I'm sure these government people appreciate citizens who come forward with information. Yeah, they do. His relief was visible. They say cooperation is always rewarded. After he left, I made a phone call to an old contact at the NSA. Within an hour, my suspicions were confirmed. Chad Rivers had been meeting with federal prosecutors for 6 weeks. Lindsay Rivers had been feeding them financial information. And Seth Burgess had been wearing a wire for the past month. But what they didn't know, what they couldn't possibly know, was that I, Dean Rivers, had anticipated this very possibility years ago. Every conversation with Seth, every business dealing, every financial transaction had been carefully orchestrated to appear suspicious, while being completely legal. I had built the perfect trap and my family had just walked right into it. That evening I sat in my study, looking at the family photos on my desk. Chad's high school graduation. Lindsay and my 10th wedding anniversary. Vacations to places where I'd once conducted operations under different names. My secure phone rang. Philip Jarvis, the current director of the CIA, and my former commanding officer appeared on the line. Dean, we need to talk. There's been some chatter about federal interest in your operation. I'm aware, I said calmly. In fact, I've been expecting it. What's your assessment? Complete betrayal. Family and business partner. They think they're building a RICO case, but they don't realize they're building it on a foundation I constructed specifically for this purpose. Philip was quiet for a moment. What do you need? Time. And when the moment comes, I'll need you to remember who's been keeping your secrets. Safe for the past 15 years. You know you have whatever you need. I hung up and opened my laptop. It was time to activate protocols I'd hoped never to use. By morning, Operation Last Call would be in motion, and my family would discover that Dean Rivers wasn't the man they thought they knew. Lindsay felt the familiar thrill as she slipped into Seth Burgess's downtown apartment. Their affair had started 6 months ago at a company party, but it had quickly evolved into something far more dangerous than just infidelity. Seth had opened her eyes to what her husband really was. The prosecutors want more financial records, Seth said, pouring wine as she settled onto his couch. They think Dean's been using the company to launder money for his government contracts. Lindsay pulled out a USB drive. I copied everything I could access from his home computer. Bank statements, encrypted files I couldn't open, contact lists. Seth plugged in the drive, his face serious. Lindsay, you need to understand what we're dealing with. Dean isn't just a security consultant. The things I've seen, the operations he's been involved in, some of it makes me sick. What kind of operations? Assassinations. Regime changes. He once showed me photos from a job in Syria where he'd eliminated an entire cell. He was laughing about it, Lindsay. Laughing about killing people. Lindsay felt a cold dread spread through her. She'd married Dean 8 years ago, drawn to his confidence and mysterious past. He told her he worked in corporate security, that his government contracts were just boring consulting work. But lately, she'd begun to notice things. Encrypted phones that would ring at strange hours. Conversations that stopped when she entered rooms. The way certain news stories would make him smile in a way that truly frightened her. The prosecutors think they can build a case for war crimes, Seth continued. But they need more evidence. Family testimony carries weight. Chad's already talking to them. I know, but they need you too. As his wife, you have access to things Chad doesn't. Lindsay nodded, but part of her felt sick. She was betraying her husband, possibly sending him to prison for life. But if Seth was right about what Dean had done, didn't she have a responsibility to stop him? There's something else, Seth said quietly. The prosecutors mentioned protective custody. If Dean discovers what we're doing, he wouldn't hurt us, would he? He's not a monster. Seth showed her a classified file on his laptop. This is from a job in Pakistan. Dean eliminated a target and his entire family to send a message. 3 children, Lindsay. He killed 3 children to make a point. The photo showed bodies in a bombed-out house. Lindsay felt bile rise in her throat. We're doing the right thing, Seth said, pulling her close. Dean Rivers is a killer, and he's been hiding behind his suburban dad facade for years. What neither of them knew was that I had been listening to every single word through the surveillance system I'd installed in Seth's apartment months ago. The file Seth had shown Lindsay? Fabricated. A test I'd prepared to see exactly how far my partner would go. The next day, Chad met with federal prosecutors Larry Joyce and Rich Cole in a secure conference room at the Southern District Courthouse. Chad had been nervous for weeks, but today he felt a strange confidence. He was doing the right thing. We appreciate your cooperation, Mr. Rivers, Joyce said, spreading files across the table. Your father's activities have been of interest for some time. I just want to make sure justice is served, Chad replied. My mom and I had no idea what he was really doing. Cole opened a laptop. We'd like you to look at some financial transactions and tell us what you know about them. For the next 2 hours, Chad walked the prosecutors through everything he knew about my business. The overseas accounts, the cash transactions, the way I would disappear for weeks at a time, claiming to be consulting for corporate clients. There's one more thing, Chad said finally. My dad has a safe in his home office. I don't know the combination, but I've seen him put documents in there, stuff he doesn't want anyone to see. Joyce and Cole exchanged glances. Would you be willing to help us access that safe? What do you mean? We're preparing search warrants, but if you could provide access voluntarily, it would strengthen the case considerably. Chad hesitated. This felt like a line he couldn't uncross. But then he thought about all the times I had been cold, distant, treating our family like just another operation to manage. Yes, he said. I'll help you get into that safe. What Chad didn't know was that I had anticipated this exact scenario. The safe contained nothing but false documents that would appear to implicate me in various crimes. All of them fabricated and designed to lead investigators down paths that would ultimately exonerate me while exposing everyone who had betrayed me. That evening I sat in my study, reviewing the surveillance footage from Seth's apartment and the audio recordings from the federal building. Modern technology made it so easy to monitor everything. Even federal prosecutors weren't immune when you knew the right people and had the right equipment. My secure phone rang. Morris Dotson's voice was tense. Dean, we have a problem. Word is they're planning to move within the week. Full arrest, search warrants, the works. Perfect, I said calmly. Perfect, Dean. They think they have enough to put you away for life, Morris. In 15 years of operations, have I ever failed to anticipate the enemy's moves? This is your family we're talking about. No, my voice turned ice cold. My family loved me. These people are strangers who happen to share my name, and they've made the mistake of thinking they can destroy me. I opened my laptop and began typing. It was time to implement the final phase of my contingency plan. I sent encrypted messages to contacts in 12 countries, activated bank accounts that had been dormant for years, and made a single call to Philip Jarvis. It's time, I said when Philip answered. Are you sure about this? They crossed the line when they decided to betray me. I'm just finishing what they started. After hanging up, I looked at the family photos on my desk one last time. Then I methodically removed each one and fed them into my document shredder. The Dean Rivers who had loved these people was dead. What remained was something his family had never seen. The man who had earned the nickname River Styx in intelligence circles because crossing him meant a one-way journey to hell. Tomorrow, my family would discover exactly who they had been living with all these years. And by the time they realized their mistake, it would be far too late to save themselves. The morning of the planned arrest, Lindsay woke up feeling nauseated. She barely slept, alternating between crushing guilt about betraying Dean and paralyzing terror about what might happen when he discovered what they'd done. Seth had assured her they'd be in protective custody by evening, but something felt profoundly wrong. Dean was already gone when she came downstairs, Unusual for a weekday. He typically worked from home on Wednesdays. She found a note on the kitchen counter. Had to handle some business. Back this evening. Love D. The word love made her stomach twist. When was the last time Dean had actually said he loved her? When was the last time she'd felt anything for him besides fear and resentment? Her phone buzzed. A text from Seth. Package delivered. Celebration dinner tonight. The package was the final batch of financial records she'd stolen from Dean's files. With Chad providing access to the safe and her feeding them banking information, the prosecutors felt confident they had enough for a conviction. At 2 p.m., Lindsay met with prosecutor Larry Joyce at a small cafe downtown. She wore dark glasses and a hat, feeling ridiculous, but scared enough to take Seth's advice about staying inconspicuous. Mrs. Rivers, I need to be completely honest with you, Joyce said after they'd ordered coffee. Your husband is extremely dangerous. The evidence you and your son have provided paints a picture of someone who's committed serious crimes. I know. It's just hard to accept that I've been married to someone like that. We'll be executing the arrest warrant at 6 p.m. today. You and Chad need to be ready to come into protective custody immediately. Lindsay nodded, but her hands were shaking. What happens to our lives? Our house, my job. In cases like this, sometimes witness protection is necessary. Your husband has connections, Mrs. Rivers. International connections. If he suspects you've been cooperating. Joyce didn't need to finish the sentence. Lindsay had seen enough crime shows to understand the implications. Meanwhile, Chad was in his dorm room packing a bag as instructed by the prosecutors. His roommate was at class, giving him privacy to gather the things he'd need for protective custody. He felt proud of what he was doing even if it was terrifying. His father had fooled everyone for years, but justice was finally catching up. His phone rang. Dean's number. Hey Dad. Chad, I need you to come home this afternoon. Family meeting. Chad's blood went cold. What kind of meeting? The kind where we discuss honesty, loyalty, and consequences. Be here by 5 p.m. The line went dead. Chad stared at his phone, his hands trembling. Did Dean know? How could he know? At Seth's apartment, the mood was celebratory despite the tension. Seth had opened an expensive bottle of champagne and was toasting their success when his phone rang. A number he didn't recognize. Seth Burgess. Mr. Burgess. This is Dean Rivers. Seth's champagne glass slipped from his hand, shattering on the hardwood floor. Lindsay, who had arrived an hour ago, went pale. Dean, I think we need to have a conversation. All of us. My house. 5 p.m. today. I don't think that's it. That wasn't a request. Dean's voice was different. Gone was the casual warmth Seth had known for 8 years. This was something else entirely. Cold. Precise. Deadly. Seth, I know about the apartment surveillance. I know about the federal prosecutors. I know about everything you and my family have been doing for the past 3 months. The only question is whether you come voluntarily, or whether I send people to collect you. Seth looked at Lindsay, who was shaking her head frantically. What people, Dean? You're a security consultant, not some. Dean's laugh was terrifying. Oh, Seth, you have no idea who you've been working with, do you? Did you really think a suburban dad could afford the lifestyle we've been living on legitimate consulting fees? Dean, we can explain. No explanation necessary. I've been watching you build your little case, feeding you exactly what I wanted you to find. You've been my unwitting assets for months. Seth's laptop chimed with an incoming file. When he opened it, his blood turned to ice. Security footage of him meeting with prosecutors. Transcripts of his conversations with Lindsay. Financial records showing payments from the government for his cooperation. How did you? I've been monitoring federal communications in this district for 2 years, Seth. Did you think I wouldn't notice when my own business partner started taking meetings with prosecutors? Lindsay grabbed the phone. Dean, please, we can work this out. Lindsay. Dean's voice softened slightly, which somehow made it even more frightening. You know, of all the betrayals I've faced in my career, family betrayal cuts the deepest. It's also the one I punish most severely. We were trying to protect ourselves from. From what? I've never harmed either of you. I've provided for you, protected you, loved you. And this is how you repay that devotion. We know what you really do, Dean. The killing. The war crimes. War crimes. Dean's laughter was genuinely amused, a dry, chilling sound. Lindsay, everything I've done has been sanctioned by the United States government. Legal. Authorized. Necessary. But you were so eager to believe the worst about me that you never bothered to verify anything. On the laptop screen, new documents appeared. Dean's actual service record, his commendations, letters from 3 different presidents thanking him for his service to national security. The documents, Seth, showed you were fabricated, Dean continued. Tests. I prepared them to see how far you'd go, and you exceeded my worst expectations. Seth was looking at his phone, trying to call the prosecutors. The call went straight to voicemail. They won't answer, Dean said. Prosecutor Joyce and his team were reassigned this morning. Something about national security taking precedence over their investigation. That's impossible, Seth stammered. I made one phone call, Seth. One phone call to someone who outranks everyone you've been talking to. The investigation is over. The evidence you provided has been classified. And by evening you'll all understand exactly why crossing Dean Rivers was the worst mistake of your lives. At 4:30 p.m., a black SUV pulled up outside Seth's apartment building. 2 men in suits knocked on the door politely, but with an authority that made resistance seem pointless. Mr. Burgess, Mrs. Rivers, you're needed for a meeting. Lindsay looked at Seth, terror in her eyes. What if we refuse? One of the men smiled coldly. Ma'am, Mr. Rivers asked us to remind you that refusing isn't really an option. He also wanted us to tell you that your son is already on his way to the meeting location. As they were escorted to the SUV, Lindsay realized that everything she thought she knew about her husband had been a carefully constructed lie. But if Dean Rivers, the suburban dad, had been fiction, what was the truth? And what did the truth do to people who betrayed him? She was about to find out. The SUV ride took 45 minutes, winding through parts of New Jersey that Lindsay had never seen before. Seth sat beside her, his face pale, hands shaking. Neither of them spoke. What was there to say? They were prisoners now, no matter how polite their captives pretended to be. The vehicle finally stopped at what looked like an abandoned warehouse complex. But as they were escorted inside, Lindsay realized it was anything but abandoned. The building buzzed with activity. Men and women in military fatigues, banks of computer monitors, satellite communication equipment. This was a fully operational intelligence facility. This way, one of their escorts said, leading them down a corridor lined with what looked like interrogation rooms. Chad was already sitting in a conference room, looking far younger than his 22 years. When he saw his mother and Seth, relief flooded his face, followed quickly by confusion when he noticed their obvious distress. Mom, what's going on? These men said Dad wanted to see us, but this place. Your father isn't who we thought he was, Lindsay said quietly, taking the seat beside her son. The door opened and I walked in. But this wasn't the Dean they knew. Gone was the relaxed suburban attire, replaced by military-style tactical clothing. My posture was different, straighter, more predatory. My eyes held a coldness Lindsay had never seen before. Family meeting, I said, settling into the chair across from them. Behind me stood 2 armed guards, unnecessary for intimidation purposes since none of them were going anywhere, but effective nonetheless. Dad, what is this place? Chad asked, his voice trembling. This is Station 7, one of several black sites operated jointly by the CIA and my private consulting firm. We handle operations too sensitive for official channels. Seth finally found his voice. Dean, we can explain. No need. I opened a tablet and turned it toward them. The screen showed a split view. Surveillance footage of their meetings with prosecutors, transcripts of their conversations, financial records of the payments Seth had received for his cooperation. I've been watching your little conspiracy unfold for 3 months. Every meeting, every betrayal, every lie you told yourselves about doing the right thing. Lindsay stared at the screen. You've been spying on us. I've been protecting myself. In my line of work, paranoia isn't a personality flaw. It's a survival skill. Chad leaned forward. What line of work, Dad? What do you really do? My smile was cold. I eliminate problems for the United States government. Sometimes those problems are terrorist cells. Sometimes they're rogue governments. Sometimes they're American citizens who've become security risks. The implication hung in the air like a toxic cloud. Lindsay felt sick. You're saying you're an assassin? I'm saying I'm very good at making problems disappear permanently. Seth was frantically checking his phone. The prosecutors have been reassigned. The investigation has been classified and buried. All your evidence has been confiscated as matters of national security. I stood and walked to a wall-mounted display. With a few touches, satellite imagery appeared. Aerial views of their house. Seth's apartment. Chad's college. Did you really think you could move against me without me knowing? I've been tracking enemy agents across 6 continents for 15 years. My own family was child's play. We're not your enemies, Chad said desperately. We're your family. I turned back to them. And for a moment, Lindsay saw something that might have been pain in my eyes. But it was gone so quickly she wondered if she'd imagined it. My family loved me, trusted me, supported me. My voice was calm, conversational. You people are strangers who have been living in my house, spending my money, and plotting my destruction. I walked back to the table and sat down. But I want to be fair. I want to understand why. Lindsay, you first. Why did you choose to betray me instead of talking to me? Lindsay's mouth felt dry. Seth showed me evidence. He said you were a war criminal. Evidence I fabricated to test your loyalty. Evidence you never bothered to verify with me. How could I verify something like that? How could I ask my husband if he was a war criminal? By asking your husband directly. By trusting the man you married instead of believing the man you were sleeping with. The words hit her like physical blows. Seth shifted uncomfortably. And you, Seth? My attention turned to my former business partner. 8 years of friendship. I trusted you with my business, my secrets, my family. Why? I thought I was protecting them from you. Protecting them from their provider? Their protector? The man who loved them more than his own life. My voice remained level, but there was something dangerous underneath. You destroyed my family to satisfy your own conscience about things you didn't understand. The things you've done are classified operations, authorized by 3 different administrations. Legal, necessary, and none of your damn business. I touched the tablet again. New images appeared. Files marked with various government seals. Every operation I've conducted has been approved at the highest levels. I've prevented terrorist attacks, eliminated clear and present dangers to national security, and saved thousands of American lives. But you were so eager to play hero that you never bothered to consider the possibility that I might actually be one of the good guys. Chad was staring at the files. These are real. Presidential authorizations, Pentagon briefings, CIA operational reports. All real. All classified. All proof that your father isn't the monster you decided he was. The room fell silent except for the hum of electronics. Lindsay felt the weight of what they'd done settling on her like a suffocating blanket. So what happens now? She whispered. My smile was terrible. Now you learn why crossing Dean Rivers is considered a death sentence in intelligence circles. I stood and walked to the door. Gentlemen, please escort my guests to their accommodations. Make sure they're comfortable. They're going to be here for a while. As the guards moved forward, Chad jumped up. Dad, please. We made a mistake, but we're family. I paused at the door without turning around. My family is dead. You killed them when you decided to destroy me. What's left are 3 conspirators who attempted to frame a federal contractor for war crimes. We'll confess. Seth said desperately. We'll tell everyone we made it up. Too late for that. I finally turned back to them. The investigation is classified now. Your confessions would be national security violations, and national security violations are exactly the kind of problems I'm paid to eliminate. The door closed behind me with the finality of a tomb sealing shut. Lindsay, Chad, and Seth were left alone with the guards and the terrible understanding that they had just signed their own death warrants. In the corridor outside, I removed my tactical gear and put on an expensive suit. I had a meeting with Philip Jarvis in an hour to discuss the official resolution of the situation. But first, I had to decide exactly how thorough that resolution needed to be. In my business, mercy was often seen as weakness. But these weren't enemy agents or terrorists. They were people I had once loved. The question was whether that former love was enough to save their lives, or whether their betrayal had killed even that. I looked at my reflection in a mirror mounted on the wall. The man staring back was someone his family had never met. River Styx, the CIA's most effective problem solver. This man didn't forgive. He didn't forget. And he never left loose ends. The decision was made. Philip Jarvis arrived at Station 7 precisely at 8 p.m., his black sedan escorted by 2 unmarked vehicles through the facility's outer perimeter. As director of the CIA, he'd visited dozens of black sites over his career. But Station 7 was special. It was my personal kingdom, funded through a labyrinthine network of defense contracts and foreign intelligence partnerships. I met him in the facility's secure conference room, where encrypted communications linked us to intelligence agencies around the world. The transformation from suburban husband to intelligence operative was complete. I moved with the predatory grace of a man who'd spent decades hunting the most dangerous people on Earth. Status report, Philip said without preamble, settling into a chair across from me. The federal investigation has been successfully terminated. All evidence has been classified and transferred to our control. The 3 conspirators are contained and awaiting final disposition. Philip opened an encrypted tablet. I've reviewed the files. Your wife and son were cooperating with federal prosecutors for 6 weeks. Your business partner was wearing a wire for a month. They accumulated enough fabricated evidence to destroy your cover and expose operational details of 12 classified missions. But they didn't know it was fabricated. No. From their perspective, they were exposing a war criminal to justice. The question is how you handle this moving forward. I activated a wall display showing surveillance footage from the past 3 months. Lindsay meeting with Seth. Chad talking to prosecutors. Seth wearing recording devices during business meetings. They weren't coerced. They weren't threatened. They chose to betray me based on fabricated evidence they never bothered to verify. My voice was clinically cold. In intelligence terms, they're willing assets who attempted to compromise national security. And in personal terms are irrelevant. I've learned to compartmentalize. Philip studied my face. We'd known each other for 20 years, had run operations together in some of the world's darkest corners. He'd seen me eliminate targets without hesitation, had watched me infiltrate organizations and destroy them from within. But this was different. This was family. Dean, I have to ask, are you making this decision as River Styx, or as a husband and father? River Styx doesn't have a family. Dean Rivers is dead. They killed him when they decided to destroy everything he'd built. Philip nodded slowly. In the intelligence world, personal attachments were vulnerabilities. Agents who couldn't compartmentalize family from mission didn't survive long. But my compartmentalization was more complete than most. What's your recommended disposition? I touched the tablet, bringing up 3 personnel files. Psychological profiles, threat assessments, recommendations for handling. Lindsay Rivers, emotional decision maker, easily manipulated, driven by fear and guilt. Low probability of maintaining operational security if released, high probability of attempting further exposure. Chad Rivers, young, idealistic, genuine belief he was serving justice, but he's also impulsive and lacks operational discipline. Would likely attempt to expose our activities to other agencies or media outlets. Seth Burgess, the primary architect of the conspiracy, sophisticated understanding of our operational structure, access to classified information, proven willingness to betray long-term relationships for perceived moral gain. Represents the highest security risk. Philip read through the assessments. My analysis was thorough, professional, and utterly devoid of personal sentiment. Recommendations. Standard protocol for compromised assets who represent ongoing security risks. Philip understood. Standard protocol meant permanent removal. Assassination disguised as accidents. Disappearances that would never be explained. The kind of clean elimination that left no evidence and no questions. All three. Dean, these are your wife and son. These are security risks who attempted to destroy classified operations. My expression didn't change. If I make exceptions for personal relationships, how can I be trusted to make objective decisions about national security? Philip was quiet for a long moment. He'd ordered the deaths of hundreds of people over his career, but never a fellow agent's family members. The precedent was dangerous. There's another option, Philip said. Deep cover relocation. new identities, complete severance from their previous lives, permanent monitoring, too many variables, too many opportunities for exposure. They're amateurs, civilians. They can be controlled. I brought up another display. Intelligence reports from around the world. Missions that have been compromised by supposedly controlled assets. Operations that had failed because someone decided to show mercy instead of eliminating threats. Project Nightfall failed because we relocated an asset's brother instead of eliminating him. He eventually exposed the entire network, leading to the deaths of 12 operatives. Operation Blackwater was compromised when a supposedly monitored civilian decided to contact journalists. 17 agents were killed. The Damascus network was destroyed because someone thought family loyalty could be managed instead of eliminated. 43 sources were executed by Syrian intelligence. Philip studied the reports. I was right. Mercy in the intelligence world was often just delayed execution for more people. What about extraction? Philip asked. Full debriefing, psychological conditioning, supervised relocation to a non-extradition country. Psychological conditioning is unreliable with family members. Too much emotional attachment to override through conditioning. I stood and walked to the window overlooking the facility's operations center. Below us, analysts worked on missions across 6 continents, preventing terrorist attacks, tracking nuclear proliferation, eliminating threats to American interests. Philip, every day we make decisions that save American lives by ending others. We don't hesitate when those others are foreign agents or terrorists. Why should we hesitate when they're domestic threats? Because they're your family. I turned back to him. They were my family. They chose to become something else when they chose to betray me. Philip's secure phone buzzed with an encrypted message. He read it, his expression darkening. New development. Seth Burgess had a dead man's switch. Files uploaded to a secure server with instructions to release everything to media outlets if he doesn't check in every 24 hours. I wasn't surprised. I anticipated that possibility. The files he's prepared to release are the same fabricated evidence he's been collecting. If released, they'll be immediately dismissed as forged documents created by a disgruntled business partner. You set that up too. Every document Seth has access to was designed to be easily debunked. The real classified materials are stored in systems he never knew existed. Philip closed his tablet. You've thought of everything. It's what you pay me for. The door opened and Morris Dotson entered with a status report. The subjects are secured in holding cells. Full surveillance is active. What are your orders? Philip looked at me one last time. Your operation, your call. I didn't hesitate. Begin preparation for permanent disposal. All 3 subjects. Make it look like a car accident. They were traveling together when their vehicle went off a bridge. Understood. As Morris left to implement the orders, Philip studied my face for any sign of emotional conflict. There was none. No regrets. Regrets are for people who have the luxury of personal feelings. I don't. Philip gathered his materials. I'll file the operational report. Official cause of death will be vehicular accident. Investigation will be handled by local authorities with no federal involvement. Cleanup timeline, 48 hours. They'll be officially dead by Friday. After Philip left, I remained in the conference room, staring at the surveillance monitors showing my family in their holding cells. Lindsay was crying. Chad was pacing frantically. Seth was sitting motionless, probably trying to figure out what had gone wrong. None of them understood that they'd been dead the moment they chose betrayal over loyalty. Dean Rivers, the husband and father, might have forgiven them, might have tried to rebuild their family. But that man was gone, destroyed by their own actions. River Styx didn't forgive. River Styx eliminated problems. And they had made themselves problems. At 11:47 p.m., I stood in the secure communication center of Station 7. Staring at a red phone that connected directly to the highest levels of American intelligence. Morris Dotson had left to oversee the final preparations for the accident that would eliminate my family by dawn. Philip Jarvis was en route back to Langley to file the operational reports that would officially erase my personal life. Everything was proceeding according to plan. Everything was clean, professional, untraceable. So why was I hesitating? I picked up the phone and dialed a number I'd memorized 20 years ago but never called. The phone rang twice before a familiar voice answered. "This is an unexpected pleasure, River Styx." General Patricia Kemp had been my original handler at Defense Intelligence, back when I was just another Special Forces operator with a talent for deep cover work. She'd been the one to recommend me to the CIA, the one who'd helped me transition to private contracting. More importantly, she was the only person in the intelligence community who remembered Dean Rivers before he became River Styx. "I need an outside perspective on an operational decision," I said. "Personal or professional?" "Both." There was a pause. "This is about your family." I shouldn't have been surprised that she knew. General Kemp made it her business to know everything about the assets she'd helped create. "How much are you aware of?" "Federal investigation, family cooperation, conspiracy to expose classified operations. I also know you've been running a counterintelligence operation for 3 months, feeding them fabricated evidence while monitoring their activities." My assessment? Professionally, textbook perfect. You identified the threat, contained the damage, and prepared to eliminate the security risk. Personally, you're about to murder your wife and son. I walked to the window overlooking the facility's detention area. 3 floors below, my family was spending what they didn't know would be their last night alive. They betrayed everything we built together. They were willing to destroy me based on fabricated evidence they never bothered to verify. Yes. And nothing. Betrayal has consequences in our business. Dean, these aren't enemy agents. They're civilians who got scared and made bad decisions. They're security risks who... Stop. General Kemp's voice cut through my operational detachment. Stop reciting doctrine and talk to me as the man I trained, not the weapon I helped create. I was quiet for a long moment. Outside, I could see guards changing shifts, analysts working late into the night, the endless machinery of intelligence operations that had consumed my life for 15 years. I don't know if that man still exists. He does. He's the reason you called me instead of just executing your family and filing the paperwork. The mission requires nothing. This is personal and you know it. General Kemp's voice softened slightly. Dean, I've watched dozens of good operators lose themselves in the work. They compartmentalize so completely that they forget what they're supposed to be protecting. I protect American interests. You protect American lives, American families, American values. What happens to those values if we start murdering our own families for making mistakes? I activated the surveillance system, bringing up feeds from the detention cells. Lindsay was curled up on a narrow cot, clutching a photo of our wedding day that someone had left in her personal effects. Chad was writing what looked like a letter, probably trying to explain himself to someone. Seth was staring at the ceiling, still in shock at how completely his world had collapsed. They chose to betray me. They chose to protect themselves from what they thought was a monster. Were they wrong about your methods? Yes. Were they wrong about your character? That depends on what you do next. If I let them live, they remain a security risk. If you kill them, you become the monster they thought you were. I closed my eyes. When had my life become so complicated? There was a time when right and wrong were clearly defined, when enemies were obvious and missions were straightforward. But somewhere along the way, the lines had blurred until I couldn't tell the difference between protecting my country and protecting myself. There's another factor, I said. Seth Burgess has access to operational details that could compromise active missions. Even if the evidence he collected is fabricated, his knowledge of our procedures, our safe houses, our methods, that's all real. So you eliminate Seth and relocate your family. Family members who've already demonstrated willingness to cooperate with federal authorities. Family members who have access to my personal life, my routines, my vulnerabilities. Family members who love you and made a mistake. I laughed bitterly. Love. They tried to have me arrested for war crimes. They spent months building a case to destroy my life. That's not love. That's betrayal. That's fear. And fear makes people do stupid things. On the surveillance monitor, Chad had finished his letter and was now holding what looked like a photo of me teaching him to fish when he was 12. The boy was crying. He chose to testify against me, his own father. A father he thought was a war criminal. A father who'd been lying to him his entire life about who he really was. I felt something crack inside my chest, a hairline fracture in the armor I'd built around my emotions. I never lied to them. I just didn't tell them everything. Dean, your son thought you were a boring security consultant. Your wife thought you traveled for corporate meetings. How do you think they felt when they discovered you've been killing people for the government? Everything I've done has been legal and authorized. Legal and authorized doesn't mean easy to understand or accept, especially for people who love you. The phone was quiet for several minutes. I watched my family on the monitors, trying to reconcile the people I'd loved for years with the conspirators who tried to destroy me. What would you do? I asked finally. I'd remember that the whole point of our work is to protect innocent people. And then I'd ask myself whether my wife and son are innocent people who made mistakes, or enemy agents who need to be eliminated. And Seth? Seth's a different problem. He manipulated your family, exploited their fears, and turned them against you for his own moral satisfaction. He created this situation. I understood. General Kemp was suggesting a compromise. Eliminate the primary threat, while finding another solution for the secondary risks. You're recommending I split the difference. I'm recommending you remember who you used to be before the work changed you. I looked at my reflection in the dark window. The man staring back was someone his family had never met. Someone they'd feared, without even knowing he existed. If I show mercy, it could be seen as weakness. Operational security could be compromised. If you murder your family, operational effectiveness could be compromised. How many assets do you think will trust their handler if word gets out that River Styx killed his own wife and son? It was a point I hadn't considered. Intelligence work depended on trust, and trust was fragile. If other operatives thought I'd execute family members for making mistakes, how would that affect recruitment? How would it affect the loyalty of existing assets? You think I should let them live? I think you should decide whether you're Dean Rivers or River Styx. Because Dean Rivers wouldn't murder his family, and River Styx never had a family to begin with. The line went dead. General Kemp had said what she came to say and left me alone with the decision. I stared at the surveillance monitors for another 10 minutes, watching the people I'd once loved more than my own life. Then I picked up the internal phone and dialed Morris Dotson's extension. Change of orders, I said when Morris answered. Delay the disposal operation. Delay how long? Indefinitely. I'm implementing an alternative solution. What kind of alternative? I looked at the red phone I'd used to call General Kemp, then at the surveillance monitor showing my family, then at my own reflection in the dark window. The kind that might save what's left of my soul. At 3 a.m., I entered the detention level of Station 7, my footsteps echoing in the sterile corridor. I'd spent the past 3 hours reviewing every classified file related to witness protection, memory suppression, and deep cover relocation. There were options, expensive, complex, and risky, but they existed. I stopped first at Seth Burgess's cell. My former business partner was awake, staring at the ceiling with the hollow expression of a man who'd finally understood the magnitude of his mistake. Seth. Seth sat up quickly, hope and terror warring in his expression. Dean, thank God. I thought we all thought. You thought I was going to have you killed. You were right. The hope died in Seth's eyes. I opened the cell door and stepped inside. Seth pressed himself against the far wall, but there was nowhere to go. 8 years of friendship, I said conversationally. 8 years of trust, partnership, shared secrets. You knew my family, attended my son's graduations, celebrated holidays at my table. Dean, I can explain. You can try. But first, let me explain something to you. I sat down on the single chair in the cell, relaxed, casual. It made me infinitely more terrifying. Do you know what I did before I started our consulting firm? Real work, not the fabricated war crimes you showed my wife. Seth shook his head. I specialized in turned assets. People who betrayed their countries, their organizations, their families. I studied what motivated them, what justified their betrayal to themselves, how they rationalized destroying everything they'd once claimed to love. I pulled out a tablet and showed Seth a series of psychological profiles. This is Dmitry Vilov, a Russian intelligence officer who sold out his entire network because he disagreed with Moscow's policies in Ukraine. He convinced himself he was saving lives. This is Maria Santos, a DEA agent who started working for cartels because she thought the war on drugs was immoral. She justified it as harm reduction. This is James Mitchell, an Army intelligence specialist who leaked classified information to journalists because he believed the public had a right to know about military operations. Seth stared at the profiles, recognizing the pattern. They all had noble motivations, I continued. They all believed they were doing the right thing. They all destroyed innocent people's lives in pursuit of their moral certainty. And what happened to them? I killed them all. The words hung in the air like a death sentence. But here's what's interesting, Seth. In each case, the person who turned them, the handler who exploited their doubts and fears, I killed them too. Because they were the real villains. They took people's legitimate concerns and weaponized them for destruction. Seth's voice was barely a whisper. I thought I was protecting your family. You thought you were satisfying your own conscience about things you didn't understand. My family was just the tool you used. I stood and walked to the cell door. You have one chance to minimize the damage you've done. Tell me everything. Every conversation with prosecutors, every document you provided, every detail of the case you helped build against me. And if I cooperate, your death will be quick instead of slow. Seth spent the next 2 hours providing a complete debrief. Every meeting, every piece of evidence, every strategy the prosecutors had planned. I recorded everything, cross-referencing it with my own surveillance to verify accuracy. When Seth finished, I studied him for a long moment. Any final words? Will you tell Lindsay and Chad that I'm sorry? That I really thought I was protecting them. They'll never know you existed. Your death will be classified. Your identity will be erased. And your role in this conspiracy will be buried in files that will never see daylight. I left the cell and locked the door. I made a quick call to Morris Dodson. Burgess is ready for disposal. Make it look like a heart attack. Natural causes, no investigation. Seth Burgess had 30 minutes left to live. Next, I went to Chad's cell. My son looked up when the door opened, his face a mixture of relief and terror. Dad, we need to talk. I sat across from Chad, studying the young man I'd raised from birth. 22 years old, idealistic, intelligent, naive about how the world really worked. Do you understand what you've done? Chad nodded miserably. I helped them build a case against you. But, Dad, Seth showed me evidence. Fabricated evidence that I created to test your loyalty. Evidence you never bothered to verify with me. How could I ask you about something like that? How could I ask my father if he was a war criminal? I leaned back in my chair. The same way you could ask me about anything else. By trusting that I might have an explanation. But the files, the photos were designed to look authentic to someone who wanted to believe the worst about me. The question is, why did you want to believe the worst? Chad was quiet for a long moment. Because you were never really there, he said finally. All my life you were gone more than you were home. When you were home, it felt like you were just visiting, like we weren't really your priority. I felt that crack in my chest widen slightly. I was protecting you. Everything I did was to keep you and your mother safe. From what? What were you protecting us from that was more important than actually being part of our lives? It was a fair question and I didn't have a good answer. How do you explain to a child that their father eliminates threats to national security? How do you justify missing birthdays and school plays and family dinners to prevent terrorist attacks that might never have happened anyway? The work I do saves lives, Chad. American lives. Sometimes that requires sacrifices. Your sacrifices are ours. Another fair question. I had sacrificed time with my family to serve my country, but my family had sacrificed having a husband and father who was truly present in their lives. I made choices, I said finally. Maybe some of them were wrong. And now, I activated a tablet and showed Chad a series of documents. Witness protection protocols, identity change procedures, relocation options. Now you have choices to make. You've been exposed to classified information, even if most of it was fabricated. You've cooperated with federal authorities in an investigation of intelligence operations. You represent a security risk. Chad went pale. You're going to kill me? I'm going to give you options. Option 1. Complete memory suppression. A medical procedure that will erase the past 6 months from your memory. You'll wake up tomorrow with no recollection of any of this, and you'll be relocated to a new city with a cover story about transferring schools. Option 2. New identity and supervised relocation. You become someone else, start a new life, but you'll be monitored for the rest of your life to ensure you never discuss what you learned. Option 3. Join the program. Full security clearance, complete briefing on my real work, and a position in intelligence operations where your knowledge becomes an asset instead of a liability. Chad stared at the options. What about option 4? I go home, pretend none of this happened, and we try to be a family again. That option died when you chose to testify against me instead of talking to me. Dad, please. I'm not your dad anymore, Chad. Your dad was Dean Rivers, suburban security consultant. He's dead. I'm River Styx. And River Styx doesn't have a son. Chad started crying. Deep, wrenching sobs that sounded like a child who'd finally understood that his world was gone forever. I just wanted to do the right thing. The right thing was to trust your father. You chose to trust strangers instead. I stood to leave. You have 24 hours to decide. Choose wisely. It's the last choice you'll ever make as Chad Rivers. Finally, I went to Lindsay's cell. My wife looked up when I entered, her face streaked with tears but her eyes defiant. Have you come to kill me too? That depends on what you have to say for yourself. Lindsay stood, meeting my gaze directly. I have plenty to say. First, how dare you put our son through this? Whatever problems you and I have, Chad is innocent. Chad chose to testify against me. He's not innocent. Chad is 22 years old. He was manipulated by Seth just like I was. You're adults. You made adult decisions. Now you face adult consequences. What consequences, Dean? What exactly do you plan to do to us? I showed her the same options I'd given Chad. Lindsay read through them, her expression growing harder with each line. Memory suppression. New identities. Supervised relocation. She looked up at him. Or we can join your little spy game. Those are your choices. What about choice 5? You stop being a psychopath and remember that you used to love us. I felt that crack in my chest widen further. I did love you. Both of you. More than my own life. Past tense. You killed that love when you decided to destroy me. Lindsay sat down on the narrow cot, suddenly looking exhausted. Dean, do you know why I married you? I assumed it was my charming personality. It was because you were the first man I ever met who made me feel completely safe. Not just physically safe, emotionally safe. I trusted you completely. And then you decided to betray that trust. I decided to protect myself when I discovered that the man I trusted was someone I'd never actually met. She looked up at me, and for a moment I saw the woman I'd fallen in love with 8 years ago. If you told me the truth about what you do, I would have supported you. If you'd explained that your work was classified but legal, I would have understood. If you trusted me with even a fraction of who you really are, none of this would have happened. Your work requires operational security from enemies, not from family. There's a difference between protecting classified information and lying to the people you love about who you are. I sat down across from her, feeling suddenly tired. So this is my fault. This is what happens when someone lives a lie for so long that they forget what the truth looks like. They sat in silence for several minutes. Down the corridor, I could hear Seth Burgess's final moments. A brief struggle, then silence. Morris was efficient. Seth's dead, I said quietly. Lindsay closed her eyes. Because he tried to protect us. Because he manipulated you into betraying me. Then tried to destroy my life to satisfy his own moral superiority complex. And now you're going to make Chad and me choose between amnesia, exile, or becoming like you. I'm giving you options that keep you alive. Most people who betray me don't get options. Lindsay looked at me for a long moment. What happened to you, Dean? When did you become someone who threatens his own family? I became someone who survives in a world where family members sell out their loved ones for 30 pieces of silver. We never took money. You took satisfaction. You took the moral high ground. You took the opportunity to be heroes at my expense. Lindsay stood and walked to the small window in her cell, looking out at the facility's operations center. I want option 4, she said finally. There is no option 4. Yes, there is. I want to go home with my husband and son and try to rebuild what we've broken. Your husband is dead. Your son chose to betray him. There's nothing left to rebuild. Lindsay turned back to me, and her voice was steady despite the tears on her face. Then I choose option 5. I choose to love the man I married, even if he's forgotten how to love me back. I choose to believe that Dean Rivers is still in there somewhere, buried under all this anger and hurt. And I choose to wait for him to come home. The crack in my chest split open completely. And for the first time in 15 years, River Styx felt something other than cold operational logic. He felt pain. I stood in the operations center of Station 7, staring at multiple screens showing intelligence feeds from around the world. It was 6 a.m. and I hadn't slept. Seth Burgess's body had been removed 3 hours ago. Officially, he died of a massive coronary while visiting friends in New Jersey. The investigation would be perfunctory. The death certificate signed within 24 hours. One threat eliminated. 2 decisions remaining. Morris Dotson approached with a tablet containing the morning briefings. The Burgess situation is resolved. Local authorities have been notified. Next of kin contacted. Clean termination. And the others? Awaiting your final decision. Chad Rivers has requested to speak with his mother before deciding. Lindsay Rivers has refused all food and water since your last conversation. I nodded without looking away from the screens. Somewhere in Pakistan, a terrorist cell was planning an attack on American interests. In Eastern Europe, a nuclear smuggling ring was moving weapons-grade materials toward Western borders. In Southeast Asia, a human trafficking network was preparing to move 300 children into forced labor. These were the problems Dean Rivers solved. Clear enemies, obvious threats, straightforward solutions. Not the complicated mess of family relationships, betrayed trust, and wounded love that had consumed my life for the past 24 hours. Sir, there's also been a development. General Kemp has requested a secure conference call at 0800 hours. I finally looked at Morris. Did she specify the nature of the call? Operational review of the family situation. Apparently, there are concerns at the highest levels about the precedent this case might set. Of course there were. If River Styx started eliminating family members for betrayal, how would that affect other operatives? Would they become more paranoid about their own families? Would they become less effective because they were worried about personal security instead of mission objectives? Schedule the call. And Morris, prepare full psychiatric evaluations for both remaining subjects. I want to know their mental state, their likelihood of maintaining operational security, their potential for future cooperation or resistance. Understood. I left the operations center and walked through the facility's corridors, past briefing rooms where analysts were preparing intelligence reports that would reach the president's desk by noon. This was my world. Shadows and secrets, necessary lies and justified violence. It was clean, orderly, purposeful. My family's cells were 1 floor down, in a section designed for high-value detainees. The accommodations were comfortable by black site standards. Private rooms with real beds, private bathrooms, meals from the facility's kitchen rather than prison rations. But they were still cells and the people inside were still prisoners. I stopped at the observation post between Chad and Lindsay's rooms. Through one-way glass, I could see my son sitting on his bed, writing in what looked like a journal. Through the other window, my wife sat motionless in a chair, staring at the wall. Sir. A technician manning the observation post looked up at me. Both subjects have been requesting to speak with you. The son has also asked for books, specifically history texts about intelligence operations and international relations. Interesting. Chad was trying to understand his father's world, perhaps preparing for option 3, joining the intelligence community. It showed a level of adaptability that I hadn't expected. And Mrs. Rivers? She's written several letters. Requests permission to send them to family members, employers, friends. Standard requests for notification of her situation. I reviewed the letters on the technician's monitor. They were careful. Coded. Lindsay was telling people she'd be away for an extended period, that family matters required her complete attention. She wasn't exposing operational details, but she was protecting her civilian life from the damage that sudden disappearance would cause. Professional operational thinking from someone with no training. Also interesting. Any requests for contact with outside authorities? None. Both subjects seem to understand that their situation is beyond normal legal channels. At 0800 hours, I took the secure call from General Kemp in the facility's encrypted communications room. Her image appeared on the main screen. A woman in her 60s with silver hair, and the kind of steady gaze that had intimidated presidents and prime ministers. Status report: River Styx. Primary threat eliminated. Secondary threats contain pending final disposition. And your personal assessment of the secondary threats? I activated my tablet, displaying the psychiatric evaluations that had been completed overnight. Chad Rivers shows high adaptability, strong analytical thinking, and genuine remorse for his actions. Psychological profile suggests he could be successfully integrated into intelligence operations with proper training and supervision. Lindsay Rivers shows remarkable emotional resilience, sophisticated understanding of operational security despite having no training, and continued loyalty to her husband despite current circumstances. Profile suggests she could adapt to a classified lifestyle with appropriate support. General Kemp studied the evaluations. These read like recruitment assessments, not threat analyses. The two aren't mutually exclusive. Dean, are you considering recruiting your family into intelligence work? I'm considering all options that maximize operational security while minimizing unnecessary casualties. That's very professional of you. Now give me your personal assessment. I was quiet for a moment. They made mistakes based on incomplete information and manipulation by a hostile actor. Under different circumstances, their actions might be considered operationally sound. They identified a potential threat and took steps to neutralize it. The potential threat being you. The potential threat being who they thought I was. And who do you think you are? It was the question I had been avoiding for 24 hours. Who was I? Dean Rivers, husband and father? River Styx, intelligence operative? Some hybrid of both? Someone else entirely? I'm someone who spent 15 years protecting American interests by making hard decisions about life and death. I'm also someone who apparently failed to protect his own family by not trusting them with the truth about his life. And which one of those people is making the decision about your wife and son? I looked at the surveillance monitors showing Chad writing in his journal and Lindsay sitting motionless in her chair. They looked small, vulnerable, lost, nothing like the dangerous threats they'd been classified as in official reports. I don't know. Then maybe it's time to figure that out. The call ended, leaving me alone with screens full of intelligence data, and a decision that would define who I was for the rest of my life. At 10 o'clock hours, I entered Chad's cell. My son looked up from his journal, his face hopeful but guarded. Have you made your decision? I want to understand first. Will you tell me what you really do? I sat down and spent the next hour explaining my career. The legitimate missions, the legal authorizations, the lives saved through operations that would never be acknowledged publicly. I showed Chad classified files, mission reports, letters of commendation from 3 presidents. This is what Seth convinced you I was hiding? I asked when I finished. Chad stared at the files. He said you were a war criminal, that you killed innocent people for money. I eliminate threats to American security under legal authority from the highest levels of government. I've never killed an innocent person in my life. But you were going to kill us. I was going to eliminate security risks who had attempted to expose classified operations. The question is whether you're still a security risk, or whether you're my son who made a mistake. Chad closed his journal and looked directly at his father. I want option 3. I want to understand your world, learn how to be part of it. Maybe then I can understand who my father really is. I studied my son's face. Intelligence work isn't a game, Chad. It's not a way to make up for mistakes or prove your loyalty. It's a lifetime commitment that will change who you are fundamentally. Good. I don't like who I am right now. At 11 o'clock hours, I entered Lindsay's cell. She looked up when I sat down, and I was struck by how much she looked like the woman I'd married, tired, scared, but not broken. How's Chad? She asked. He's chosen option 3. Intelligence training, full security clearance, integration into operations. And you'll let him? He's demonstrated analytical ability and adaptability. With proper training, he could be an asset. Lindsay shook her head. You're going to turn our son into another version of yourself. I'm going to give him the opportunity to serve his country in a meaningful way, while keeping him close enough to ensure he never again makes the mistake of betraying me. What about me? I showed her the same files I'd shown Chad. The real story of my career, the legal authorizations, the lives saved. Lindsay read through everything carefully, asking questions, seeking clarification. This is what you've been doing all these years? This is who I've been all these years. Why didn't you trust me with this? Because I wanted to protect you from it. I wanted you to have a normal life, a normal husband, a normal family. Lindsay laughed bitterly. Normal? Dean, you were gone 6 months out of every year. You had encrypted phones that rang at all hours. You had scars you couldn't explain and skills that made no sense for a security consultant. Did you really think I believed you were normal? I thought I was protecting you. You were protecting yourself from having to trust me, from having to be vulnerable, from having to let someone else into your real life. She stood and walked to the small window in her cell. I choose option 5. There is no option 5. Yes, there is. I choose to go home with my husband, my real husband, not the cover identity you've been playing for 8 years. I choose to be part of your actual life, not the suburban fantasy you created to keep me at arm's length. That's not possible. The security risks are manageable if you trust me instead of lying to me. Give me security clearance. Brief me on operational security. Teach me how to be the wife of River Styx instead of the wife of Dean Rivers. I stared at her. You want to join the intelligence community? I want to join my husband's life, whatever that requires. It would mean giving up everything. Your job, your friends, your identity. I gave up my identity when I married you. I just didn't know it at the time. I looked at my wife, really looked at her for the first time in months. She wasn't the frightened suburban housewife I'd been protecting. She was a strong, intelligent woman who'd been excluded from half her husband's existence for 8 years. Option 5, I said finally. Full disclosure. Complete integration. Shared operational life with conditions. No more lies. No more half-truths. No more treating me like a civilian who can't handle the truth. And if you can't adapt, if the reality of what I do is too much, then I'll tell you and we'll figure out option 6 together. I stood to leave, then turned back. Lindsay, if I do this, if I bring you into my world, there's no going back. You'll know things that will change how you see everything. Good. I'm tired of living in a world that's only half real. At 1,400 hours, I sat in my office at Station 7, staring at paperwork that would officially resolve the situation. 3 death certificates, 1 signed, 2 blank. 3 identity change authorizations. 3 sets of security clearance applications. My family was alive. My operational security was intact. The crisis was resolved. But Dean Rivers was still dead. The suburban father and husband who'd lived in that house, who'd attended school plays and anniversary dinners, who tried to compartmentalize his work from his personal life, that man was gone forever. What remained was River Styx with a family. An intelligence operative with people who knew his real name, his real work, his real world. It was unprecedented, dangerous, and completely against everything I'd been trained to believe about operational security. It was also the only choice that felt like something other than surrender. I picked up a pen and began filling out security clearance applications for Chad Rivers and Lindsay Rivers. By evening, they would officially be part of the intelligence community. By morning, they would begin training for their new lives. The old family was dead, but maybe if we were careful and smart and very lucky, we could build something new from what remained. 6 months later, I stood in the briefing room of Station 7, watching my wife and son receive their first independent mission assignment. The transformation had been remarkable and unsettling in equal measure. Chad, now officially a GS-12 intelligence analyst with provisional field clearance, had adapted to the work with an enthusiasm that bordered on obsession. He'd completed accelerated training in surveillance, counterintelligence, and operational planning with scores that impressed even veteran instructors. More importantly, he'd developed an intuitive understanding of the moral complexities that had once made him judge his father so harshly. Lindsay, designated as a special operations coordinator with full operational clearance, had proven even more surprising. Her natural ability to read people, combined with her civilian background, made her invaluable for missions requiring deep social infiltration. She could blend into any environment, extract information without raising suspicion, and coordinate complex operations with a precision that impressed Philip Jarvis himself. But the real change was in me. Sharing my world with my family had forced me to examine assumptions I'd held for 15 years. I'd had to explain not just what I did, but why I did it, how I justified it, what it cost me personally. The process had been painful, like performing surgery on myself while wide awake. Your target is Marcus Webb, arms dealer operating out of Miami, I explained to the assembled team. It felt strange to brief his family as assets rather than civilians to be protected. He's been selling military-grade weapons to cartels, but we suspect he's also moving hardware for international terrorist organizations. Chad raised his hand, a habit from his college days that annoyed the veteran operatives but amused me. What's our operational objective? Arrest, elimination, or intelligence gathering? Intelligence first, then disruption. We need to identify his suppliers and buyers before we roll up the network. Lindsay studied the target file. Social profile suggests he's divorced, isolated, vulnerable to female attention. She looked up at me. Classic recruitment target. Which is why you'll be the primary contact. Chad will provide technical surveillance support. I'll coordinate from here. Morris Dotson, who'd adapted to the new family dynamic with professional skepticism, cleared his throat. Sir, are you sure about deploying family members on active operations? The personal risk factors are manageable, I said firmly, and the operational advantages outweigh the risks. What I didn't say was that keeping my family involved in intelligence work was the only way to ensure they never again felt compelled to betray me. By making them part of my world, I'd eliminated the fear and ignorance that had led to their conspiracy with Seth Burgess. After the briefing, I walked with Lindsay and Chad to the equipment room where they'd be fitted with surveillance gear for the Miami operation. How are you feeling about your first real field assignment? I asked Chad. Nervous. Excited. Guilty. Guilty? About what? What I did 6 months ago. About not trusting you. I stopped walking. We'd had versions of this conversation dozens of times, but the guilt never seemed to fade completely. Chad, you made a decision based on the information you had available. In intelligence work, that's all any of us can do. But I should have talked to you first. Yes, but I should have trusted you with the truth from the beginning. We both made mistakes. They continued toward the equipment room, passing operational maps showing current missions across 6 continents. Chad studied them with the fascination of someone still adjusting to the scope of his father's world. Do you ever regret it? Chad asked. The work, I mean. The things you've had to do. I considered the question carefully. I regret that I couldn't find other solutions to some problems. I regret that good people sometimes get hurt in the pursuit of necessary objectives. But do I regret serving my country? No. Even when serving your country meant lying to your family? Especially then. Because the alternative was making you targets for every enemy I've made in 15 years of operations. Lindsay caught up to us as we reached the equipment room. Speaking of enemies, has there been any fallout from the Seth situation? I shook my head. Officially, Seth Burgess died of natural causes while visiting friends. His insurance policy, the files he was prepared to release, died with him. There's no investigation, no loose ends. And unofficially? Unofficially, the intelligence community now knows that River Styx eliminated a threat to operational security and successfully integrated his compromised family members into active operations. It's being studied as a new model for handling domestic security risks. Chad looked uncomfortable. We're a case study? You're pioneers. The first family unit to transition from civilian to operational status without memory suppression or identity change. We entered the equipment room where technicians began fitting them with encrypted communications gear, tracking devices, and other tools of modern espionage. Watching my wife and son prepare for dangerous work brought up emotions I hadn't expected. Pride, terror, love, and a deep sense of responsibility. Dean, Lindsay said as a technician adjusted her earpiece. Do you think we can make this work? Really work? I mean, not just operationally, but as a family. It was the question that kept me awake at night. We'd solved the immediate crisis, but could we build a sustainable life together? Could a marriage survive when both partners were intelligence operatives? Could we raise children in this world? Could we ever truly trust each other again? I don't know, I said honestly. But I know we couldn't make the old way work. Maybe this version of our family will be stronger, because it's based on truth instead of lies. Or maybe it will destroy us in new and creative ways. Maybe. But at least we'll face that destruction together instead of separately. The Miami operation lasted 3 weeks and was a complete success. Marcus Webb was turned into a double agent, his network mapped completely, and his terrorist connections identified and eliminated. Chad's surveillance work was flawless. Lindsay's infiltration was textbook perfect. And my coordination kept them all safe while achieving every operational objective. More importantly, we'd worked together as a team. For the first time in years, I felt like I had a real family instead of a cover identity I maintained at home. But success in intelligence work always came with consequences. 2 days after returning from Miami, I received a classified message from an encrypted account I recognized. Viktor Klov, a Russian intelligence officer I'd crossed paths with several times over the years. The message was simple. Congratulations on your family's new career. We look forward to testing their skills. The old Dean Rivers would have immediately moved his family into protective custody, changed their identities, relocated them somewhere safe. River Styx would have eliminated the threat through targeted assassination. But this Dean Rivers did something different. I called my wife and son into my office and showed them the message. We have a problem, I said simply. Chad read the message twice. Russian intelligence knows about us. Viktor Klov has been tracking my activities for 5 years. He's smart, patient, and extremely dangerous. Lindsay studied the message. This isn't just a threat. It's an invitation to play. Exactly. The question is how we respond. We respond as a family, Chad said without hesitation. Together. I looked at my son, then at my wife, then at the message on the screen. 6 months ago, a threat like this would have sent me into operational overdrive, focused entirely on protecting my family from dangers they couldn't understand. Now, I was asking them to help me plan our response to those dangers. All right, I said. Let's design a trap for Mr. Klov. Together. As we began planning our counter-operation, I realized that everything had changed, not just our family dynamics but my entire approach to intelligence work. For 15 years I'd operated alone, trusting no one completely, sharing nothing unless absolutely necessary. Now I had partners who knew my real name, understood my real work, and shared my real dangers. It was terrifying and exhilarating and completely unprecedented. River Styx had always worked alone. But Dean Rivers had a family now. A real family built on truth instead of lies. Strengthened by shared danger instead of comfortable ignorance. And together, we were going to be far more formidable than River Styx had ever been alone. Outside the window of Station 7, the sun was setting over New Jersey, painting the sky in shades of red and gold. Somewhere in Moscow, Viktor Klov was planning his next move. Somewhere in Washington, intelligence officials were studying the Rivers family as a new model for operational integration. But inside the briefing room, a husband, wife, and son were working together to solve problems that would keep their country safe. They weren't the family they'd been 6 months ago. That family was dead, destroyed by betrayal, and rebuilt through forgiveness. They were something new, something stronger, something that their enemies weren't prepared for. I had learned to trust my family with everything. In return, they'd learned to trust me with their lives. It was perhaps the most dangerous relationship any of us had ever been part of. But it was also the most honest. And in the world of shadows and lies where we now live together, honesty was the rarest weapon of all.